I'm Jonathan L. Walton. I am the Plummer Professor of Christian Morals at Harvard University, Professor at Harvard Divinity School, and you are watching Empowering Voices.
Empowering Voices is elated and honored to welcome for the first time to our community Jonathan Walton, the Professor of Christian Morals at Harvard University, as well as the Pusey Minister at Harvard's Memorial Church. Welcome to Empowering Voices.
Great to be here with you.
First question, you are an ethicist, so we're going to put you on the spot. If you would just like for you to talk and share with us the importance of the integration of ethics and religion within the context of the 21st century society.
Well, I'm a Christian social ethicist, and that means I engage Protestant communities concerning their kind of doings and sufferings and the decisions that they make and the moral problems that they face, both from an internal perspective and from a social and cultural and political perspective. I mean, I think this is important as a field because it provides us with a framework to think about the pressing problems, not only problems that communities have to face as it relates to internal pressures and the like, but where I like to lay my work are the varying kind of social problems of racism, classism, sexism, all of these structural issues that really frame our existence and impinge us on every side. And so I think that Christian social ethics is important because we're all wrestling with how to live a just and a good life.
When you say we're all wrestling with how to live and adjust to a good life, let's talk about poverty. Right now, the World Health Organization says that every 3 seconds, a person here in the United States, we're in Chicago, America, the world, is dying because they don't have enough food to eat.
No, it's an issue. I mean, we know that we have extreme poverty in this nation. We have people that are living on lonely islands of poverty that are just trapped in what sociologist William Julius Wilson calls a permanent underclass. That's a major problem. But we also have to deal with the growing inequality in American society and the growing divide between the haves and the have-nots that really has what we used to call this nebulous category of middle class. It's trapped in a kind of social quicksand today. And so if we look, New York Times released a report the other week. Since 1988, wages for the most part have remained stagnant, but housing prices have gone up 56%. Healthcare prices have gone up over 100%. College tuition in the double digits, because when you have a large concentrated number of haves, they're able to raise the price. And so therefore, it costs so much more for you and I just to remain in the game. And too many people today are losing ground because of that. And that's something that we have to touch on and that we have to deal with, not only at a governmental level, not only at the level of public policy, but also as communities of faith.
And speaking of communities of faith, why or should communities of faith not only speak to poverty, but also racism, sexism, ageism, any of the isms, if you will?
Well, I think we speak to it if we take the gospel seriously. I mean, if we take the teachings of Jesus very seriously, right? In terms of, well, why did he come? Jesus came to deliver good news to the poor, to heal the brokenhearted, to set the prisoners free. People who are trapped within the shackles and the dungeons of our society. That's why we believe in this Christ. That's why we promote this gospel of the good news. And so it's one thing for us to just say that Jesus heals and Jesus delivers, but it's another thing to say that actually you can find healing and delivering to your physical, structural, social needs right now in this life. And that's the role of the church.
And speaking of the role of the church, you are the Pusey Minister for the Harvard Memorial Church. Is there, perhaps maybe this isn't a fair question, but I'm just very curious, is there a load of pressure on you to speak to the ills of society when you are ministering, particularly at such a high-profiled pulpit, if you will?
Well, I believe, to whom much is given, much is required. And obviously, I'm in a very privileged position, being a tenured faculty member at Harvard University and then having this pulpit at the Memorial Church. And it is a very active community, and we are concerned with these things, even as we are the beneficiaries of that privilege. And we can't ever lose track of that either. So absolutely, it's not only about my speaking truth to power, as we like to call it in progressive Protestant communities, but it's also creating a space where the leading minds and leading thinkers can come and have a free space to speak to these varying conditions of our society. And I think that this is, one of the things that I love about the position most.
And within the context of you being in the dual position of being a tenured faculty member as well as an ordained minister of the gospel and serving as the Pusey minister for the Harvard Memorial Church, what do you say to, or speak to, if you will, the need for not just Christian faith centers, but all faith centers to come and address and even to do work in the world for people who are suffering, for people who are experiencing the oppressions of racism, poverty, sexism?
One of my favorite quotes, and actually, if you ever receive correspondence from me, whether it's an email, a letter, or what have you, it's always signed "One Love." People tend to think that that's a reference to Bob Marley, but it's actually not. It's the great scholar and educator Benjamin Elijah Mays. And he has a quote from a 1957 book, I believe, How to Be Christian in Race Relations. And it's the love of God and the love of humanity is one love. Right? And I believe that if we profess that we love God, a love God that we have never seen, then we have to affirm our love for one another, because that's the only way that it's realized. And one of the Benjamin Mays' greatest proteges, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., his work cut across racial, religious, regional lines, because he understood that it wasn't about just religious identity, it wasn't just about racial identity, but it was about moral affiliation. And so therefore, no matter whether you are Hindu, whether you are Islamic, whether you are Buddhist, whether you are Christian, if you share these moral virtues and moral values and this commitment to helping those who are trapped in the shadows of life, then we have to find ways to work together. Because if we don't work together to mollify and alleviate these harsh conditions, then we're all going to suffer together.
Now, thank you for reminding me about Dr. Elijah Benjamin Mays, and for the fact that you, too, are a graduate of Morehouse College. And because Morehouse is also known for giving the world preachers and teachers, prophets of ethics, and reminders of what we are to do with the true meaning of the gospel, I would like for you, if you would, talk about the importance of what it means for us to remind those persons who are coming up, who are currently undergraduates, who are working in graduate programs, or who may be in postgraduate programs, as far as education, no matter what their discipline may be, within the context of that one love.
Well, I appreciate you acknowledging that, yes, I am a graduate. I'm a proud graduate of Morehouse College, and there has been such a lineage, a wonderful cloud of witnesses from Howard Thurman, Benjamin Elijah Mays, who was president there, Martin Luther King Jr., Otis Moss III. I mean, there's just wonderful prophetic voices. But also, let me also say that all these prophetic voices were aided by a wonderful class and group of women that have always been active, whether it was the Fannie Lou Hamers and the Septima Clarks and the Ella Bakers, right, and the Janetta Coles, right? I mean, so it's been working across these gender lines in partnership that we've been able to move the cause forward, the progressive cause forward. Now, having said that, I think that's essential, number one, that we cannot divide ourselves up. I talked about race, I talked about region and religious identity, but definitely also working across gender lines for those of us who believe. We have to find ways to collaborate and to coordinate effectively. so that we can raise up a new generation and also get out of the way of subsequent generations, because they have a whole new set of concerns and problems that they are facing, whether it be racial profiling in this context, whether it be the burgeoning prison industrial complex, whether it be the access to public transportation with the kind of growing ghettoization of the suburbs that's now locking young people out of jobs that are developing back in gentrified central cities. These are concerns that they know firsthand and they know how to speak to, and we have to give them a voice and hear what they have to say.
Now, tonight we're talking to you today on Thursday, October 11th, and tonight you will be the lecturer for the 7th annual Shelby Rooks Lecture at Chicago Theological Seminary, where we are here conducting this interview. And you will speak tonight to, the title of your lecture is The Du Boisian Dilemma, Sacrificing the Faith in Order to Save the Race. What will you address?
Well, just tonight, I'm talking about, number one, let me say, I'm in this grand tradition, right, of C. Shelby Rooks, this great scholar of African-American religion, religious studies writ large. And there have been wonderful scholars of religion that have preceded me in giving this lecture. So it's a real privilege and pleasure for me to be in this space. And I'll be talking about exactly that, the construction of the study of Black religious life. And all roads in the study of Black religion really go back to that grand towering sage of Great Barrington, William Edward Burghardt Du Bois. And I'm going to talk about the ways that he constructed particular methodologies to assess from a social scientific perspective communities of faith. But yet he didn't hide behind science, because he had very political ends and political goals in mind as it related to the creation of a multiracial democracy. And how well he may have helped us to get there, to think about the capacious role of Black churches. And also how he may have scapegoated Black churches in some ways to untie the pathologies that many white supremacist scholars put on Black bodies. I'm actually making the argument that Du Bois may have just put it on Black religious bodies. But again, it's all things for us to have a conversation about what is the appropriate role of Black religious faith communities. That's what Du Bois was dealing with in 1897. That's what we're here dealing with today in 2013.
Is it a fair question to ask you, is it a heavier burden for us in the year 2013 as far as this Black church purpose for the Black bodies that are still oppressed, living in an alleged integrated society?
Every generation has its own cross to bear. I believe that to be true. I don't want to get into when we start comparing, well, it's easier in this time than it was in this time, right? Well, at least you're not dealing with segregation and colored-only signs. You have all of these opportunities. Well, no, racism, sexism, classism, the interlace of all of these things, they're all particular to each generation. And therefore, that's why we have to find creative and constructive ways to work together in our own historical moment. We know other generations had Selma. Other generations had Emmett Till. Well, today we have Florida, we have Trayvon Martin, we have the prison industrial complex. And that is a heavy load for us to bear.
Our last question, and we hope that when you return to Chicago, or perhaps if Empowering Voices is on the road, you'll talk to us again. As a Christian ethicist, our last question we'd like to ask you, which we ask all of our Empowering Voices guests. Our podcast series is intentionally titled Empowering Voices, Uplifting the Voice of the Voiceless. The voiceless we see representing those voices that cannot be heard because of their social location. Would you speak to, I'd like to ask you, as a Christian ethicist, is empowerment important, and what does that mean when you hear the word empowerment as a Christian ethicist?
Well, I mean, obviously, empowerment, it's about power. It's about cultivating agency and the ability to pursue justice, freedom, to live in a multiracial democracy. Now, one thing I am very clear about, we all make choices in conditions not of our own choosing. We all have to understand that. But at the same time, we know that, that there are those who are swimming against a particular current because of the accident of their birth, whether it be they were born in the wrong community, they were born the wrong gender, they were born with the wrong color skin. And so those of us who have privilege and power, whether it's our male privilege, whether it's our class entitlement, not only do we have to speak for those who don't have a voice, more importantly, we have to work to give up some of our own privilege to create the sort of spaces so people can speak for themselves. That's what empowerment is all about for me.